Hello and welcome to the PowerSwitch, gaming's call-in talk radio show. My name is Peter Spezia, and today is January 10th, 2017. This is the third episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We use Discord as a means to add and drop callers to talk about video games and switch the power that's found in a typical gaming podcast. You can join our server to participate during recordings at bit.ly/thepowerswitch. That's with TPS in uppercase. We are brought to you by rhymeswithasia.com. In the coming weeks, we'll be working on broadcasting our live recordings on Twitch, plus making the show available on podcast services like iTunes and Google Play. If you're new to the show, we're hoping to have these podcasts happen at least every weekend, but also during certain weekdays, generally lining up with the evenings of when big game news breaks. First, I open the show for about 10 minutes to reflect on the show's main topic. Then, after a small commercial break, we set up callers to join the show to either discuss the show's main topic or bring up any gaming question of their choosing. Once that has run its course, I'll end the show with a fun segment and we'll call it a day, hopefully in about an hour's time. If that sounds like your kind of podcast, then let's get right into it. So, I have a simple question to open things up here, and it may sound simple, but in reality, it's not exactly. What is journalism? Well, Wikipedia defines it as the production and distribution of reports on the interaction of events, facts, ideas, and people that are the news of the day and that inform society to at least some degree. I mean, look at the state of game journalism, and that seems pretty accurate. Some people start up their own blogs for fun, but also to build up experience, to be hired as a game journalist at some of the big websites because you report on the news of the day. That seems to be what generally most gaming outlets do. But there is a degree in journalism that you can get at universities. And if you talk to journalists older than us today, older than millennials at least, they scoff at the notion of what journalism has become today. It's because journalism is rooted in basic tenets to the practice. There's a practice of ethics and standards. Common elements include the principles of truthfulness, accuracy, objectivity, impartiality, fairness, and public accountability. There's also the idea of the protection of sources. In the United States, at least, an extension of freedom of the press gives journalists a legal protection to keep the identity of a confidential informant private, even when demanded by police or prosecutors. Now, I'm not a journalist. I have no qualms about admitting that. I went to school to study film and TV and video. And if anything, by speaking in a microphone to you all, I'm more of a commentator or an entertainer. But in my day job, I produce digital media for public relations outside of the video game industry, for what it's worth. Now, a company's PR department is a keeper of secrets. PR's relationship with journalism is complicated at best, because when it comes to portraying a company in a positive light always, there are advantages to working well with journalists and sharing information. But as that keeper of secrets, PR often purposely keeps information away from journalists for a variety of reasons. Now, what should journalism be? It's a field that should always strive to report the truth, even if that may not be in the company's or subject's best interests, because the public deserves the truth. Otherwise, the only news that the public receives is dictated by a company, or in some cases a nation, which will always state the facts that paint themselves in the best light. Now, the United States has a very famous example of this with Watergate. It was a major political scandal from the 1970s that essentially involved espionage on another political party, with President Richard Nixon becoming personally involved in its cover-up. Now, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein discovered evidence of this political break-in and made it public because it was the people's right to know of this wrongdoing, as much as the Nixon administration would have liked to keep it secret. Now, is it starting to become clear what game journalism should be? It's not just the regurgitation of press releases from video game companies or the news of the day, though commentators can certainly use that as talking points, believe me. When it comes to writing video game reviews, that's closer to game criticism than it is journalism. Journalism is about finding the truth about what is happening in the world, and in games' cases, it's the game industry. It is informed by developing sources, staying unbiased, and remaining accurate even as information changes. It is not about creating fake news or rumors without truth, all for the sake of gaining clicks and fleeting internet fame. So we come to the story that happened a little more than 24 hours ago, where the game from Platinum Games, Scalebound, has been canceled by Microsoft. I mean, this is supposed to be one of their main first-party games this year. Even in my intro sequence for this show, the PowerSwitch, I have a little bit of the Scalebound protagonist. I mean, the Dante light dude, bro, but I mean, this is going to be his last episode. I've got to scrap him. The game no longer exists. I got to use a different guy in the next episode. But it's a really interesting story when it comes to journalism. So let's talk about a particular internet journalist of note who I find very fascinating. His name is Liam Robertson, and he's a self-proclaimed video game history guy on his YouTube channel, but you may know him as a contributor to Unseen64 and Did You Know Gaming. Now, on January 8th at around 9:49 p.m. Eastern Time, Liam tweeted off a series of tweets that, goes as follows. Every so often, you get a tip that is so hot that you don't want to go anywhere near it in case you get burned. Here's the little fire emoji and, interestingly, a dragon emoji. To continue, it's a shame that people are so touchy about game news. Nobody is allowed to objectively report on a hot rumor. You have to plant your flag in it and say, this will happen. You can't just say, this is what some are saying, let's wait and see. Some people will always twist your objective report to abuse you and say, well, you said X would happen. It's bullshit. End quote. And he's absolutely right. I mean, it just goes to show the state of how people react to game news. And it's complicated, but I think we can get to that soon. Anyway, the next day on January 9th, which was yesterday when we're recording this, at 1:43 p.m. Eastern Time, he says, bad news. I'm hearing that Scalebound is in trouble, possibly canceled. Just rumors for now, but we'll see. If Microsoft makes it official, I will share more on what I have heard has been going on with Scalebound. Nasty business. Now, Liam is working on a video about the Wonderful 101's production history, so he states that sources at Platinum Games reached out to him about Scalebound's fate. Now, details aren't specific, but he goes in a YouTube video to say that there have been creative differences between Microsoft and Platinum, as well as unrealistic expectation from the Western publisher's part. A few minutes later, after Liam's tweets, Jason Schreier over at Kotaku posted Kotaku's article that basically mentioned these rumors that, people around the industry had heard as well, but this was Kotaku's report on them, prompting Microsoft to say, hey, if you want to comment, go ahead. Now, Microsoft follows up with a statement nearly 2 hours later, saying, after careful deliberation, Microsoft Studios has come to the decision to end production for Scalebound. We are working hard to deliver an amazing lineup of games to our fans this year, including Halo Wars 2, Crackdown 3, State of Decay 2, Sea of Thieves, and other great experiences. Now, in case this was not obvious to you, this is what public relations is. Ignore the bad news that's going on because that portrays the company negatively. Focus on the games that you have coming out this year. Try to portray the company in the best light despite what seems to be a very nasty situation. Again, this is PR. Now, Microsoft's handling of Xbox One exclusives can be discussed at another time, but it is telling that they have taken down official Scalebound videos, as if the internet forgets. Plus, you should probably go back and look at their big announcements from E3 2014 and see just how many of those projects have either been canceled or still have yet to be released. So what does that have to do with journalism? Well, it all comes back to the Nintendo Switch, which has its big event later this week. Now, the history of reporting the possible truth about Nintendo Switch before Nintendo confirms the information this week, it'll likely come down to 3 journalists, Laura Kate Dale, Emily Rogers, and yes, Liam Robertson. It's especially telling when they confirm similar information amongst each other through tweets that they hear different sources, kind of saying the same things. Or, if they hear some other leak that's gotten out there and they say, oh, I share the same sources, but they kind of confirm amongst themselves that, they really don't. It's pretty telling, actually. Now, whether they're independent journalists with their own websites or they outsource their work, it's the journalistic practice that should be commended, only changing reports when the information given by their sources change. And if much of what they say comes true later this week, I hope that they get the credit that they so richly deserve. But as Liam tweeted earlier, game enthusiasts aren't so friendly about that kind of thing. Look, I understand. We love being surprised with video game news when it comes out of nowhere. I mean, Cloud in Super Smash Bros., that was amazing. But when moments like that happen, recognize it as the accomplishment of a video game company keeping their secret so well that nobody with inside information became a journalist's source. To say that journalists should stop ruining the surprises, that is a trap that companies want you to fall for so that they control the information. Or are your own confirmation biases so prevalent in your life that you are only comfortable being told information that fits what you want to hear by companies that you feel personally connected to? Is this your way of avoiding the truth? Well, then that really is fake news. When a journalist chooses whether or not to make information public, that is their own choice. Yes, some journalists, especially when they start out, may want to hold off on that hot scoop because they fear it'll damage the relationship they have with the PR department at their favorite game studio. And they like getting those download keys after all. Or a more experienced journalist may be waiting for another source to corroborate a story, or something about the whole thing just seems fishy. The public does not get to determine what a journalist goes through and what they do, though. If someone is trying to play journalist by creating falsehoods, on the other hand, well, that's a whole separate issue entirely. It is an individual's responsibility at the end of the day to not take every journalist's report as gospel, but understand that if the journalist has properly done their job, it is informed by protected sources. And again, doing the job is a big if. I'm sure you've come across rumors back in your day where people just made up information to try to take the credit of journalism when they're really far from it. At the end of the day, though, journalism has an important role to play in everyday life. It is part of how we have a functioning and a free society. This is also the case with the video game industry. If we are going to be a medium to be respected, then maybe we should respect our journalists as well, as long as they prove to be reliable practicers of the craft in today's information age. Anyway, that's what I have to say. When we come back, we'll get to the callers. What do you think about what I had to say? I'd love to hear your thoughts, but you can also bring up whatever gaming topic you'd like to discuss. And don't forget, you can also reply to what another caller had to say too. Well, that's when we get back from the break here on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. Let's get to the calls here, talk about game journalism, Nintendo Switch, whatever you'd like to talk about. So let's open it up. Yvonne from Illinois, welcome to the Power Switch.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. My mic works this time.
Yeah, you were here in our call room last episode.
Yeah.
Couldn't fit you in, a lot of tech issues, but I'm glad you're here. What's on your mind?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk actually about, since you brought up games journalism, something that's on my mind a lot, which is, we got all these sites, IGN, Game Informer, that do written word. But then you have YouTube where there's a lot of videos, like Greg Miller, kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Easy Allies, Electronic Playground Network with Victor Lucas, just all those people. Basically.
All of them do great work, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And but do you think that video is, because I just have this feeling, and I think part of it is, a generational thing, as the generations progress, especially because I'm part of that generation, we have bad attention span kind of, and we tend to, it's trouble for me to read, long story short. Sometimes. But I am curious to know, do you think that in the future it's going to be mainly video, that's going to wipe out the written word, or do you think they can coexist?
That's a good question, and that's an interesting perspective. I'm an older millennial, but I still kind of fall into that. So I often am presented with a lot of those cliches by some at work. I think there is a place for both to exist. Obviously, video helps for the whole attention span thing, which I think is valid, but it also provides for just a much quicker immediacy. When you have, you can just drop of the hat, record a podcast anytime, like Easy Eyes can, or like Kind of Funny can. I think there's a very effective form of communication, whereas it does take time to write something up, but at the same time. Especially as social media becomes more prevalent, I think there is a purpose to, mentioning with the games journalism in the last segment, the whole news of the day, sort of the regurgitation of press releases to kind of have the news in a concise form. Because honestly, when we look at our phones, and if we're addicted, that's one thing or another. But if we look at our phones, we're not going to be able to watch a video. And if we want that information right away, you're going to need to read it. Granted, there may be a way where, obviously, we've seen the decline of the magazine industry, which, Game Informer originally, started from, but they've been starting to adapt to their digital content. But, places like IGN, I mean, that's like the biggest game site in the world. And you could argue that, the market share of those big sites has decreased, but I don't think it's going to disappear completely.
People are always talking about how, there's a lot of video content on YouTube, but there is video content on sites like Game Informer. So I'm not too into Let's Plays anymore, but Game Informer did like a lot of Let's Plays, replay, which they play like retro games. I don't know if you ever seen that before or not.
I've heard of it, but yeah, I'm not one for watching Let's Plays either, so I totally get you there.
It's like, for me, it's like if I want to watch a game, I play the game.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, unless I'm really awful at it.
Yeah, I just want to see the ending.
Fighting games. I'm trying to get into Ultimate Marvel, but that's another subject.
Ooh, that's fighting games are tough. That takes a whole other skill set. And yeah, I know I'll watch, Let's Plays if, for example, Inside this past year, it had a secret ending, apparently. And like, I had no idea when I finished the game, but I want to know what the secret ending is. I'm not going to go back and play through the game and, unlock all of those keys that are necessarily, but, I'm going to go to a Let's Play. I'm going to see what it is. I'm an adult. I have, a time restraint, so I'll go to that. So there is value in Let's Plays, and it's, certainly, I mean, gosh, you look at kids, and I'm talking like, young kids. I know, friends who have young kids, and kind of were like, they know how to use the tablet so early, and they're all the Minecraft videos. It sounds like just those Minecraft videos, but like, I mean, that's what kids are growing up doing. So I mean, there is the place for Let's Play, and yeah, you say those big websites are. I think it's mostly reactionary. They're trying to kind of get into a piece of that, but there is something to say about, especially when it's long written form, there's value in that. And that's something that those big sites are going to have, they're going to hire the best people to do things like that. But I think there's a way for both to exist, but the traditional media is a little unstable a bit by the change in the market share. And they're a little worried about their future. And I think that's why they try to react that way. But I think as we, grow to find that balance, both can certainly exist.
Because it's funny, because I'm actually someone who's interested in, just like I think a lot of people want to get into games media. And when I was younger, I was someone who I wanted to work for like Game Informer and stuff. But, then I think like, well, you look at kind of funny, that stuff is very generated by they do the thing, it's more free form, and then it's controlled by the people with Patreon.
Yes, yep.
Because I also like creativity when it comes to that stuff. I don't like to regurgitate the news. That's my big problem, especially if people are bending the news too in their favors to push agendas or something.
Yep, right.
Yeah, I have a problem with that, especially if I had to do that stuff. So I'd like to be more creative. One thing I've noticed, people get mad when let's say someone reviewed a platformer and they hate platforming games. So it's like, what do you expect? This person reviewed it and he doesn't. But it's like, do you think that's on the site's fault, kind of, because they got someone who doesn't really know a lot about that, where they could, or same thing with the fighting game. You should get someone who's knowledgeable on that and not just say, oh, this game sucks. It's really hard, or these mechanics are flawed. But really, it's because they don't study the mechanics. They don't really pay much attention because they're not passionate about it.
Oh my God, absolutely. It's definitely on the media outlet to assign the reviewer who's someone who's knowledgeable about the genre, enjoys the genre, appreciates it. But it's also on the viewer, the reader, the listener even, to understand that reviews are subjective. They are not objective, and you're going to have a difference of opinion, and that's okay. Difference of opinion on the internet is okay. I know a lot of people don't believe that, but it's the God's honest truth. So, yeah, definitely. And interesting thing about the whole, you're talking about Patreon and, kind of funny, definitely a big disruptor in that whole movement. But as someone who, I'm not going to try to toot my own horn here, but, been podcasting a long time. I was even tried to live stream for a long time. If anyone remembers the name Stickam, I'm back from those days trying to use Stickam as a broadcasting service. And just the technology and how that's changed and how that's become more available to people, that I think has been a huge change in how people have decided, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to try to produce content that I think people will like. The cost of production has dropped, so that has really just opened the whole industry really up to consumers.
It's also kind of tough too at the same time, because if you know, for the consumers it's great, but for the people who want to create, it makes things a lot harder. But it's also good because it ups the game, makes more competition and stuff, you can say.
Absolutely. Yeah, you add the competition, you got to be on your best behavior, really, and just, be on the top of it. Absolutely.
I got to ask, because I know I probably got to go soon. What are some guys you watch that you really enjoy? Because I know you're a big Kind of Funny fan.
Big
I
Kind
know
of Funny
you've
fan.
mentioned I'm a huge Kind of Funny fan. I've followed Greg Miller since I was 14. 19.
Wow. And that's been a long time. You think he's coming up on 10 years in the game industry, you said recently?
Yeah, it's nuts. And he's really awesome. I've never met him. I'd love to meet him, go to like those Kind of Funny live events or something. That would be awesome one day. And he seems very genuine, and he loves what he does. He worked through cancer, which, that's hard. When you go through the chemo, and that's not easy. And, he did it anyways, despite his schedule, despite, some problems. So, yeah.
No, the Kind of Funny guys are amazing. Greg Miller, a big inspiration. I mean, really all of them. I mean, they have done really a remarkable job in creating that industry for their own. Definitely Easy Allies. Jim Sterling, another big one.
Yes. He's a former journalist who left because of that reason, if I'm pretty sure what we're talking about.
Yeah, he was at Destructoid. He had some time with The Escapist, and then, just going from there to, branch on his own. And he's another one who's picked up the Patreon ball, ran with it, and made an industry for himself and just made a living. It's remarkable. I mean, gosh, you can go back in the old days. I mean, there's zero punctuation. There's, the old days of the Angry Video Game Nerd. I mean,
Angry Video Game Nerd's fantastic. He is so passionate about what he does. And it's a totally different way. There's a lot of copycats. I don't think there's any more, but back then there were so many copycats. And he's really
one of the originals, yeah.
And his movie stuff I really like too. I know this is a games podcast, but really quick, I just wanted to I liked his Monster Madness stuff. That was really fun.
No, I mean, to have a rooting in filmmaking, and that's I went to school for, and so he's a big inspiration for sure. And if another group that is really great at talking about games positively and critically, Extra Credits, they do not get enough credit.
I recently checked them out, and I was like, how have I not? And I was actually watching them recommend other YouTubers, and it was like, I was just looking, and I've seen their other videos too, and they're really good about how video games saved his life.
Yeah.
And they really go into depth about things, which is what I like. It's because as much as I like comedy guys like James Rolfe, of course, and John Tron, I do like informative too.
Right.
I like to be educated, not just laugh,
Right. And the Normal Boots guy is another, big inspiration. John Tron, PBG, Gerard, the Completionist. So
Completionist is great.
Yeah. I mean, I love people who can, think positively about games, but also critically. And, a lot of them just do the great job. So it's a different topic entirely, but I appreciate the question.
Yeah.
And it seems like we have similar tastes, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Yvonne, thank you so much for calling in. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at punkfan97. It's all one word. And you can find me on YouTube. My channel name is Ivan Lekovic. I don't really post a lot of content. Like I said, I want to do vlogs probably. And I haven't really done too many video game stuff. I've only have 2 videos. IVAN, like Ivan, and then Lekovic, Lekovic. And it should show like the Court of Owls, if anyone's familiar with Batman, the picture, the whatever it is, Court of Owls. So if you see that, that's my channel. So
Very cool. Great insight. Thank you so much for calling. Glad we could fit you in.
No problem. See you.
Over in Indianapolis, Indiana, Logan, welcome to the PowerSwitch. How are you?
Hey, Peter. How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Good. We had Max on last week. You guys are both from the Millennial Gaming Speak podcast, so I'm glad to hear your end here today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So what do you want to talk about?
So after hearing your intro to the show this week and you so eloquently talking about kind of the state of games journalism and games media as a whole, and especially with the trend of I refer to them personally as leakers because I really don't consider them journalists.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I wanted to talk about just the whole leak culture that is happening right now.
Definitely.
In video games. And I think it's really problematic personally. I think we've gotten into a dangerous area where I feel like everybody's trying to be first rather than reporting like actual truth. And I don't want to get too carried away because I don't know the process that many of these people have who are trying to be the first to get these stories. And you mentioned a couple of the more notable ones, at least like Emily Rogers and Laura K. Buzz, people like that who have been really active specifically with the Switch and trying to get information out about that ahead of the event that's coming up later this week.
Right.
I think that there is a place for that probably within the industry, but I find it problematic when their entire work, I guess I would call it, is centered around that. I feel like they're just constantly trying to report the things that they hear inside from obviously the sources they have. And the other problem that I have with it is I'm curious to know how many sources that they do have, because is it just one person that is telling them things? Is it multiple people? The internet is so focused on being first, rather whether it's a comment section on YouTube or whether it's stories like this in the gaming industry. I just think it's getting really disturbing to see that people are trying to get ahead of the story so quickly. And I think Twitter has kind of aided that as well, because it just a quick 140 character tweet shoots up and they can tell you immediately what they've heard from their sources recently. And I know many of them do end up doing write-ups either once a week or once every few days when they do hear a bigger story. But for the most part, to me, it seems like following them and things like that, it really does just come straight out of their Twitter feed and they just tell everybody what they hear. Going off of that, I think it's problematic because it puts the game developers who aren't ready to reveal this information out into the public, it kind of puts them on the edge, and then they have to play defensively from that point because we as the consumers feel like we know everything that they're going to do. And at the same time, they want to surprise us. Like they don't want their hand to be shown at a certain point. And I that's personally why I don't like it, is these leakers are spreading info that the developer has clearly not wanted us to know yet, or else they would have told us, and they are instead getting out ahead of the story. So I think investigative journalism definitely has a place in various, whether it be sports or politics, things like that. I definitely think it has its place. I'm not a huge fan of the way it is happening in the gaming industry right now, though.
Mm-hmm. So a few things. I think the whole, mentioning the whole being first and as opposed to being right, that's journalism as a whole. That's not just games, as you well know. And you're absolutely right. I think, social media, particularly Twitter, has definitely exacerbated that. That's become a big issue. As far as when these leakers have their sources, I know Laura Kate Dale in particular, she has her website letsplayvideogames.com. Recently did a write-up detailing all their sources. I think she has 5, 6, 7 different sources, and they all come from different points. And so she mentions in each sort of story that she's talked about, I mean, granted, she's the person who, hours or so before, it was about an hour before Nintendo made it official, got the kind of tip that, this Switch trailer is going to come down tomorrow. So, I mean, when she had heard the Switch name but didn't want to put it out there. So when these people end up being correct, I mean, I don't think we can be too harsh on them because they have their different sources. And it's a matter of these sources talking. I think that's another key point, is that, yes, the company may have their plans to delight and surprise us, but then you also have these people connected to that company, and they're the ones responsible for going out and talking and being the sources for these journalists. So it's not just a two-way street, but it's that source in the middle that plays that dangerous game. I mean, it's not like the journalist is going in and, hacking into emails and things like that. And it's honest journalist work that they're doing by getting all these different sources. And so, and people may ask, like, who is Emily Rogers? And yes, she has a track record. I remember, several years ago, she had a rumor that there was the whole, it's going to be a Metroid and Star Fox crossover for E3 and all that. But at the same time, people change. And you're going to hold, actions of several years ago against someone who may have different sources. And another thing that's coming up is, I know a lot of people are saying that, oh, well, you said one thing now and now you're saying a different thing. Well, that's because the source information changes. It's the same thing what's going on right now with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And, a lot of people were saying around the industry that this may slide out of March. I mean, it may be looking to June. But now sources are coming back with updated information. Nintendo's probably had discussions since then. Marketing is starting to roll out and say, oh, well, it looks like at least in North America, they're trying to push for March. That's not saying they were wrong at the time. They were probably right at the time, but the circumstances have changed. So, I mean, I think games is still a very early medium as a whole.
Yeah,
I mean, we're still learning, a lot of these kind of boundaries, and it is very dangerous when you have people that are trying to abuse this power. I mentioned, these other possible leakers that are trying to spring up. I mean, particularly there's the Geno rumor. The guy goes by the name of Geno, and he's trying to say all these things about Switch. One of them being, they've got that VR patent. It's, they have a certain name for it, but they're going to talk about Nintendo and VR with the Switch. And then, these three with Emily Rogers and Laura Kate Dale and Liam Robertson, they're kind of talking amongst each other on Twitter. I'm like, nope. They say they have the same sources, but they don't. We haven't heard any of that, and that's pretty telling when those three have been so right for most of this time, and then they have one outlier. So yeah, it is dangerous and abusive when people try to take advantage of that public trust and take advantage of that hype. That's, I think, where we kind of have to learn as an industry. But I'm sure other aspects of journalism, other industries have similar problems. It's just, we have to do a better job of discerning that information for ourselves as well. We can't just necessarily take everything at a straight face. And I get where people may not want to believe the leakers and whatnot, but I think we at least have to keep it on our radar, at least when they have such a track record like those have.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to necessarily vilify them, because you are right. I mean, many times they do end up being right. And I mean, that was valid journalism. Like, they did their job. They did what they set out to do. And when they are right, like, they do deserve congratulations for that. It is that source in the middle. You are correct with that. And I'm wondering whether these companies internally, Nintendo specifically, knows which employees it is and if they're fine with that word getting out. And that's a deeper question that I would be interested in hearing, because face value, you would think that these companies don't want it getting out because, I mean, like I said, specifically with sticking with Nintendo, they're obviously trying to hold all of their cards until this event on the 12th. They don't want anything getting out. They have been so specifically quiet with their messaging with the Switch that I just can't see why they would be okay if they did know that a select group of people were telling these journalists or leakers, whatever you want to call them, certain specific info about the Switch or about Breath of the Wild or anything like that. I think what's causing concern to me, though, so I am currently an editor for a PlayStation website. And the trend that I have seen in my time with this site is that I brought up the race to be first. And of course, like you mentioned, that's a common thing among all forms of journalism. There were a few at this, I feel like I can talk about this now because these writers who worked at this site with me are not there anymore. But we had some younger writers on staff who were so obsessed and focused with being first to a story that they wouldn't worry about the facts that were coming out about a story. So again, if there were rumors or possible leaks about something that we expected to see ahead of time that was all but confirmed, except for actually seeing it, these writers on our staff would preemptively write up the news stories for them as if they were fact, so that all they had to do once it was confirmed was to just hit publish. And I kept urging them, that is not a good practice at all.
You're absolutely right.
You should not be doing that by any means. And I'm hoping, I mean, I say the younger generation, I'm only 22, and these people I was working with were about 18. So we're comparable ages, but I just think that if this industry does continue to go more towards this leak type culture, and like you said, many people are trying to establish themselves as such a person in social media networks, specifically on Twitter, or carving out their own websites or something like that to write up personal blogs and have their own independent thing and gain a following that way. I hope that this generation that is coming up and wants to get in games media doesn't look to them as, okay, this is how they do it, therefore this is how we should do it. Because I really do think that the three we keep mentioning, while they are doing actual journalism, and I obviously didn't read Laura Kate Dale's piece where she does talk about her sources. That's something I actually would be interested in looking at once we finish this show here.
Of
That's
course,
something I'll have to go check out.
I should mention, she still protects them, keeps them anonymous, but, mentions it's like, oh, this one, works for Ubisoft. So they would have knowledge of the games that Ubisoft are working on with Nintendo. And
well, she talks about her process, which is interesting. So, I mean, I don't know if that all connects or you get what I'm saying, but I am worried that because, and this really seems like a more recent thing in the industry, this has really started to gain some steam, this model of reporting within the past 2 to 3 years. I mean, the gaming industry has gone from one extreme to the other within the past 15 years, where we used to only get news 20 years ago once a month from a gaming magazine where, hey, here's everything that happened at E3, to where now it's, hey, here's what we can expect to see from this company, I think 3 months from now. You should take my word on this. And it's all still reporting, but it is getting to a dangerous point where I am concerned about the people who are coming up in the industry now and how they are going to be reporting. Because again, we do call it games journalism, but oftentimes it is more of, I've always thought of it more as enthusiast writing or as enthusiast reporting. And you need to have that base knowledge of what journalism actually is and what it is you are doing in this industry. Because if you write about games, that does not automatically qualify you as being a journalist. So I don't know. I just think there's cause for concern in a lot of areas. And I hope that this doesn't spin out of control and become a major issue in the future.
I think you're totally spot on. And when you're talking about, those younger writers, it's writers that don't have journalistic training. I mean, when we talk to older journalists who have had the training, going through school, getting that journalist degree, and honestly, they're disgusted by the kind of writing in all fields that happens in that rush to be first. And it's really the lack of training and what is perceived as journalism, but is really not. And again, like, this is coming from someone who does not have that training, but is at least, I think, learned enough to understand that perspective. Same with you. I mean, even though you're a young guy, I mean, you seem to have good head on your shoulders, and generally the practices. I mean, because you're absolutely right. Like, should not be writing up rumors as if they're fact. That's irresponsible. That's dangerous. Absolutely right.
I mean, always check with multiple sources and make sure that, I mean, don't just report on one rumor. I mean, these are just things I preach myself. And again, I don't have any formal journalist training. Not really. I was I'm in college currently. I started out as a journalism major, quickly switched degrees because I was too afraid to just major in that alone. So now I'm getting more of a broad media degree. So I do have a slight background in it, but it's just discerning and knowing when to report and when to hold your cards and be like, okay, let's wait and see this play out a bit more before we go too crazy here.
For sure.
And I mean, it just too much haphazard reporting. And again, the leakers specifically that we've mentioned, I don't think they are the worst of the worst, but I'm afraid of the people who may come up underneath them and try to establish themselves.
By them inspiring others, and then those ones coming up don't go through the same processes. I totally agree.
Yes.
And then as far as Nintendo and people inside Nintendo and worrying about that information getting out, I'll tell you, man, like, that's public relations 101. Like, that's why they hire people to manage that damage control and to try to find, where those different, possible leaks may be. That's why people are hired to do PR.
And I mean, and then it gets into the whole ethics of, well, should the leakers be reporting this if the company doesn't want it out? And it's like, well, they're still a journalist, so it's their job. So if they're hearing that, of course, they're going to potentially report on it. But you get into a weird sort of gray area where you don't know what you should be doing. And that's why many of them, especially with these leakers, like, that's why they'll report one thing, but you oftentimes won't see those same reports on an IGN or a GameSpot or anything. Those they won't report half that stuff. They'll leave that to those people.
For sure. So. And give Kotaku whatever crap people want to with during the whole Gamergate thing, whatever. I think a lot of that was unfounded personally. But Kotaku has been actually one of the outlets doing legit reporting. I mean, with all the Ubisoft leaks, with Bethesda, and those publishers and companies, they've burned Kotaku for it, and that's all part of the game. And I think that's why when you're talking about the young writers coming up and they start a website and they like getting review codes, and if they come across something like that, I mean, I mentioned earlier, like, they may be hesitant to publish that because they like that little cozy relationship, and that's playing the exact game that the company wants with PR.
Yeah, and we've run into issues with that as well with our small little site with review codes and things like that. So I think people get in over their heads and they don't know what to do. But yeah, again, I'll agree with you. Kotaku, I think they do the best reporting on the internet, honestly. I think Jason Schreier and Patrick Klepek, who's now with Waypoint, I think are the two best reporters in this industry. Totally agree. They're the top dogs of this industry right now. And I think Kotaku does great work. I can't really remember a situation where they've been wrong, even going as far back as the Fallout 4 leaks that they published a few years ago. Those all turned out to be spot on in the end when the game was actually revealed. So Kotaku does incredible work, and I think that's so deserving of praise for them. And I think it is idiotic that so many people continue to lambaste them, because their quality of work and their reporting is always pretty much spot on. And that is commendable for the bigger sites, because like I said, they are very hesitant to report those things. Look at IGN a few years ago when they reported that The Last Guardian was canceled, blew up into a whole thing. And like, it's rare for sites to post big stories like that when they are not 100% sure. And for Kotaku to continue to do that and almost always get it right in the end is, I think, so deserving of praise.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's all about sources and it's all about that training. Well, Logan, great points. Really appreciate the insight. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I am at MooreMan12, MOORE Man12. Last name and all that stuff. You can also, as Peter said earlier, find me on Millennial Gaming Speak, which is a podcast that I have myself. Peter, maybe we'll see you on there sooner rather than later too.
I am hoping so. And go Cubs.
Go Cubs, baby.
What a year.
World Series champs.
What a year. I was having fun following your Twitter account as that was all unraveling. And my Tigers have some rebuilding to do, but I think they'll be a little stagnant.
I think they're about to blow it up, so that'll be fun to watch, I'm sure.
We'll see what happens. Well, Logan, thanks so much for calling in. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Max from Florida. Welcome back to the PowerSwitch.
Hey, Peter. How's it going?
Good. Just heard from Logan. Now I hear from the other half of the Millennial Gaming Speak podcast.
Yeah, it's I actually really like this show format because I get to just pop in whenever I want. It's pretty cool. It's like you got to be on the ready.
Absolutely.
Ready for those Discord notifications.
Oh, for sure. And I know it's a tough time during the weekdays when it's a specific time frame that I can only record during, and be it time zones and whatnot. I mean, we try to get recording on the weekends, so hopefully more people can be free, but I appreciate your availability. So what do you want to talk about?
You were talking about games journalism on this episode and different things, and with the Switch event this Thursday, I thought I'd try to tie the two together.
Totally fitting. Yep.
And talk about how if the Nintendo Switch was a boat in the water, it's got a ton of holes in it, and it's leaking lots and lots of water.
Which is weird for a Nintendo product, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, when you think about their products in the grand scheme in their games and, secret projects and stuff, they're usually pretty tight, but the Switch has just been left and right, people leaking things all over the place. And it's pretty interesting how silent Nintendo has been through months and months of leaking, especially after they officially announced the Switch back in October.
Right.
The event's here in 2 days from the time we're recording this, and we feel like we know pretty much everything. We've got lots of people talking around the $250, $300 price point. GameStop things are leaking from Germany and release dates and all this stuff. The Zelda release date keeps going back and forth, and March is sounding more and more likely, at least for the US audience, even after those Target ads went up.
Yep.
Logan was alluding to this a little earlier. There's almost no mystery or magic left to the Switch event, and I'm really curious, personally, just what's left for them to talk about on Thursday.
Yeah, it's almost like, at this point, what would surprise you about the event, right? I think if we see some third-party exclusive that we hadn't heard about before, I think that'd be a great surprise. I think going into it, what I don't want people to do is to be disappointed by what they show, because if everything happens that we've heard about and leaked about, that's still a great showing. If they hit that $250 price point, if they have those launch games, that's a great showing. Yeah, it may not totally surprise you, but I'm sure that they've put everything that they can in this 1 hour presentation to try to show as much as possible. We'll be getting a lot of hands-on from different journalists that are going to their local events to try it hands-on. That's really exciting. I think that's probably the most exciting thing. The journalists that are going to try to dig into that detailed information, like what are the specs? Let's talk about that. I think that's something to look forward to. I just don't want people to, look at a Nintendo presentation that may have, 95% information that we know about and say, well, that was a bad presentation. I didn't like that at all. I wasn't surprised, so therefore it was bad. I think that's the wrong approach there.
I don't know. That for sure, because if Zelda Breath of the Wild is a launch game, whether the rumors recently are confirmed, that's still crazy that we're getting Zelda Breath of the Wild here in 2 months, possibly.
Yeah, think about it. 2 months. That's amazing.
This kind of a move reminds me a lot of Fallout 4, or more apt, I guess, would be Mass Effect Andromeda with... we've known about Mass Effect Andromeda for quite a long time. EA, I think 2 E3s ago, was doing all those dev diaries during the press conference.
Yeah.
And Mass Effect was formally announced at that event. And then Mass Effect's been really quiet until this year, 2016, where they showed it off at E3 and then the Game Awards. And now we've got the official announcement that it's coming out March 21st, which is 2 months away. And while we've known about the game in whole, really the specific kind of information and seeing the game has really been in the past 8 to 9 months. And that's pretty exciting for Mass Effect fans. And I think Nintendo's doing a similar thing with the Switch. We've known about the Switch's existence for 18 months at this point, but we really haven't seen it until October. And now we're getting ready to come up here in January, 2 months before it's supposed to launch, and get this whole flood of information that's going to be really exciting. And that includes Zelda, which we saw extensively at E3. And I think they're really generating some good hype behind it, even though leaks are all over the place.
And with Zelda in particular too, I think what's really exciting is that, we saw Zelda running on the Switch during the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon
thing.
But that was just off screen, and you can only discern so much. But all the rest of the Zelda footage we've seen, it's on the Wii U. Performance not that great. Frame rate. How does the environment change with the open world? So I think that's going to be really exciting to see. Just more Switch specific Zelda footage.
Yeah. One thing I particularly am excited about is the kind of the operating system, or the Nintendo OS, as people have nicknamed it. That is something that's been actually sealed tight, and no one really knows anything. I think the closest we've gotten is during that Jimmy Fallon event when Reggie took the Switch out of the dock. It looked as if he had to confirm putting it in some form of portable mode. That's it. And that's so specific and just even a theory at that point. That's going to be really cool. And surprisingly, Mario. The only thing from Mario we've seen was what they showed in the reveal trailer, and then that, I think, humorous rumor going around that it's called Mario Switcheroo, which I would love if it was called that, but I highly doubt it.
I think that's the Geno leak that the main three Nintendo leakers were trying to disprove, but it's a funny name. No, I mean, that's true. I mean, we've only seen those few shots of Mario before the girl goes and brings the Switch to a rooftop party. Kate, we're trying to have conversations. We're drinking here. What are you bringing your Nintendo here for? But yeah, and that'll be exciting to see that, and to actually see visual representation of the Rabbids Mario RPG, if that's going to be a confirmed thing. I think there's still a lot of excitement. I mean, I've been also interested about Beyond Good and Evil, and if they have a video teaser at the end of it, that would be really. So I think there's still nuggets here and there.
Still some magic left to be had.
I mean, I don't know if we'll necessarily get the big total shock of, the whole equivalent of Cloud and Smash Brothers, though it would be great to finally hear about the Cloud amiibo.
But it'll come out with the Switch version of the game, don't you know?
There you go. And hey, maybe with some new characters too, maybe.
Please, Shovel Knight, please. There's already an amiibo. You don't have to make it again. Just give me Shovel Knight, please.
Exactly. So I think there's still some excitement. And when it comes with Nintendo being a leaky ship, I mean, it's all about the different sources that are wanting to talk. Not only that, but I think there's just a special kind of excitement for Nintendo news in general. I mean, we saw it with Smash Brothers and all the leaks there, the ESRB leak that ended up being, right on the money. So there's a specific kind of passion that I think just amps it up a little bit more when it's Nintendo. So it's not totally their fault. It's maybe more the fervor of those who are wanting to disclose that information. But also it is the kind of middleman, as we were talking about with Logan. But yeah, you mentioned with the Nintendo OS, we had Matt, the Darker Eye, on last episode, and he was talking about needs to be a good system first, a fun system to use. And that'll be really interesting to see with all the hands-on.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Max, you were on the show last week, but to reiterate, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet on Twitter at Max the White, and like Logan said earlier, we host a podcast together called Millennial Gaming Speak, and you can find us on iTunes or SoundCloud. This week, I think Logan and I are going to be testing some sort of live reaction to the Switch. And then we're going to be having a full breakdown of the Switch and all the news that comes out over the weekend that we'll be recording on Sunday.
Great stuff. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much for calling in.
Thank you.
And over in Illinois, Video Game Guru 64, welcome back to the PowerSwitch.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep, good.
Okay, cool. The thing that I wanted to bring up was the Nvidia Shield 2, which was revealed at CES last week.
Yeah, definitely.
And, it looked surprisingly like the Switch, so I don't know. And it's going to be costing like $200, so I don't know what's going on with that.
It is interesting. I mean, Nvidia does have a stake in the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, they have the graphics processor and, the creators of the Shield as well. I think, because they are the creator and they can kind of drop the price a little bit, and that's all about margins. That's all marketing there. They're going to try to steal some market share. But, Nvidia is also making a pretty good cut from Nintendo Switch. And so I don't think they're too worried about the price difference. Nvidia is in a weird place because they also had, during that press conference, they had the GeForce Now, which is their whole stream gameplay from a powerful PC. It's almost like the PlayStation Now equivalent. And their pricing is ridiculous on that. I think it's way too expensive. So I love Nvidia. I mean, I have a powerful graphics card in my computer and all that. So they make great stuff there. But I think the whole, set-top box like Amazon's tried to do and Nvidia tries to still keep going on with that, with the Shield, I think it's still a market that hasn't really been totally tested well yet. And I think they're just happy that they got a console bid, really.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's going to sell or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, the first Shield had some struggles there. I mean, I wonder if the power difference, does that make a difference? Yeah.
Maybe since Nintendo's giving some share there that it can boost off the Switch or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they'll probably definitely see what the Switch does, and I'm sure they gather lots of data and of performance and whatnot from that. That'll be interesting to see, and I think that's $200 is a fair price point for that because they could have easily gone $250. It's not as powerful, I don't think, as obviously some of their computer graphics for sure, but I'm sure it does what they want it to do.
And it's using the Maxwell architecture,
mm-hmm.
so
it's not Pascal, which is what those high-end graphics cards are doing. Arguably, Nintendo is pretty similar as far as a general Maxwell power sort of thing with the Switch. So I think they probably put comparable sort of power devices in there. I mean, I would still have to see the specs to be sure, but it sounds like kind of in that range.
Yeah. So that's all I wanted to talk about. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, CES was an interesting event. I was there for automotive, so I didn't get to really check out the floor, but it's a weird year when they're talking about 8K TVs as well at the same event, and 4K adoption has been pretty low as well. So it's always an interesting place, but good to talk about gaming news from CES as well. Thank you. Where can people find you on the internet?
Video Game Guru 64 everywhere. I'm not on Instagram, just the main media things. Yeah. So see ya.
All right. Thanks, Video Game Guru. Take it easy. All right. When we come back, we're going to do a wrap up of the different headlines that have come out of the past week, and it'll be a fun little wrap to the show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Power Switch. Let's get into a headline roundup. A lot of things to talk about with Nintendo Switch, especially as we're in the last couple days before this big event. The last rumors are starting to squeak on out here, and just to kind of get themselves known a little bit, we start with a Nintendo social media post over in France that is wondering, what are you most looking forward to about playing Splatoon on Nintendo Switch? Oops, think that, might have jumped out a little bit too early. Plus, Nintendo has apparently invited some pro Splatoon players to a hands-on event. So yeah, that's pretty much definitely happening. I have not played Splatoon yet on Wii U, and if it's on Nintendo Switch, I think that's probably where I'm going to be playing it, especially if it's a pack-in game, but we'll see if that happens. GameStop over in Germany, there is a picture of an inventory screen. And, those have been so easy to fake in the past, but, it seems sort of legit, at least worth mentioning, just to discuss the possibilities. Some placeholders there, a couple Sonic games, one being Sonic 2017, but would not surprise me if Sonic Mania gets announced for Nintendo Switch. Some interesting things, though, Dragon Quest 10 and 11. Square Enix kind of confirmed that 10 was coming to Switch again, but we also have 11 on the way as well. Lego City Undercover joins. Are we getting a new Lego City game? That would be interesting. And Monster Hunter was also on that rumored list. That would be huge if Japan especially gets a Monster Hunter game. I mean, Monster Hunter's pretty big over here, but it's a megaton over in Japan. That would be just a big get over there, and just would really help the popularity to start off at the launch. At Best Buy, there is apparently people reporting that there was a price notification in store systems for those that were higher up in the Best Buy sort of hierarchy, I guess you could say, that the price for Nintendo Switch should be dropped to $249.99. That kind of lines up with different rumors that we're hearing, but it doesn't mention, any other SKUs. Just would be interesting if that's, the starting price. I think that's a really good starting point. I mean, that'd be a great way to get people on board early. Also, we had GameStop's Nintendo Switch website go up with a quote saying, Nintendo Switch games will include new title offerings from Mario, Splatoon, Zelda, the NBA, and more. You will even be able to play Skyrim on the go or Pokemon at home with the Nintendo Switch. The unit will include a number of handy interchangeable Nintendo Switch accessories. Now, the Pokemon at home bit, that got scratched from their website, but that kind of leads to that Pokemon Stars might be a thing that is happening. That would be really interesting. Also interesting that they mentioned the NBA and Skyrim. They take it from the trailer, but will that be confirmed at this weekend's event? We'll have to see. And finally, just breaking, Hori accessories, accessories from Hori that are officially licensed by Nintendo. A lot of different things, leaking out on NeoGAF, other Nintendo sites have picked this up. Some interesting things of note, I think, an arcade fight stick controller. Is that possible that maybe is something like a Pokken port in the works if they're talking about getting a fight stick controller for Nintendo Switch? Interesting. A LAN adapter. So that kind of almost proves that, there probably isn't anything built in, but requiring the LAN adapter just like Wii U. A car adapter, playing like, Mario Kart for Nintendo Switch, like in the car in that trailer. And then, of course, a stand if you want to have it be on the plane, and then you got to detach those Joy-Cons and use it. So give a look at, there's a lot more, but it's really interesting to see some of those in particular. Also, Mass Effect Andromeda, March 21st, 2017, as Max mentioned. Injustice 2, another release date announced from Ed Boon, May 16th, 2017. So some couple of release dates mentioned there. Finally, Conan's Clueless Gamer segment could get its own TV show. But Conan may not host, but he would executive produce. I don't get it. What's the point of making a Clueless Gamer show if it doesn't have Conan? Like, that's the whole bit, is that Conan doesn't get games, and that's part of the fun. That's the humor, the comedy. I don't get it. I mean, TBS is saying, yeah, we get a company sending us games to play, and we can only do so many Clueless Gamers, so maybe we spin it off an orange show. Come on, let's actually get the casting right before you start making those kind of decisions. Anyway, that'll do it for this episode of The Power Switch. We are hosted by rhymeswithasia.com, and we're on YouTube and Twitch at Rhymes with Asia. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Power Switch. You can email us any questions, concerns, comments, or opportunities at powerswitchpod@gmail.com. Most importantly, to participate in future episodes, you should join our community on Discord by visiting bit.ly/thepowerswitch. That's with TPS in upper caps. It's a small but growing community, and in these early months of the show, it'll be easier than ever to have your voice heard on this podcast. Now, our next show will be Friday, January 13th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have lots to discuss about Nintendo Switch. I mean, we'll have, the event from the previous night. We'll have the Treehouse stream with the games from that morning. Not yet about the different hands-on things, maybe during the weekend, but let's start with the early reactions. Friday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Looking forward to, having you join us for our next episode, whether it's live or on your own time. With that, I'm Peter Spezia. Until next time, switch up, call in, game on.